They beat her, tore her dress right off in front of the entire town, laughter and cruel whispers ringing in her ears. No one moved to help. She stood alone, humiliated and broken, under the scorching eyes of a merciless crowd. Every slap, every cruel word, tore not just her clothes, but her very soul. Her heart shattered in silence, buried beneath the weight of their hatred. But then, something unexpected happened. From the shadows of the blacksmith's forge, a man stepped forward. Silent, steady, like a storm about to break. The crowd fell into stunned silence. What he did next wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a challenge. A whisper that would shatter the darkness, swallowing her whole. In that moment, the girl who was meant to be forgotten became something far greater. Something no one saw coming. What he said next would change her life forever. And it would shake the entire town to its core. Stay with me. This is not just a story of pain, it's a story of fire, strength, and an unbreakable spirit that refused to die. The sun hung low over the dusty town of Harlow Ridge, painting the wooden buildings in a tired golden hue. It should have been a quiet evening, but a storm was brewing, not in the sky, but in the hearts of those gathered in the town square. She stood alone in the center, trembling. Her name was Clara. Just 17, barefoot, hair tangled like the weeds that grew along the creek bed. Her dress was torn at the hem, and her face was streaked with dust and dried blood. A rope tied her wrists. She didn't cry anymore. Her tears had dried with the morning frost. All that remained now was silence and shame. They said she stole bread, that she snuck behind the butcher's stall and grabbed a loaf when no one was looking. But no one asked why. No one noticed her younger brother, barely 6, coughing in the alley with hunger in his eyes. The town wanted a lesson taught, so they dragged her by the hair to the square. The crowd gathered, not to help, but to watch. Boots stomped against the wooden planks, spurs jangling like bells of judgment. Laughter echoed. Murmurs twisted the truth like smoke turning into shadows. A man with a red vest, the mayor's son, stepped forward. He smirked, circling Clara like a vulture. "You think you can steal from this town and walk away?" he hissed. She didn't speak. A woman in the crowd shouted, "Make her remember." That's when the first slap landed. Clara's head snapped sideways. She staggered but didn't fall. Another hand yanked her braid. Another fist struck her ribs. She gasped, bent over, but still didn't break. Then the worst came. With a wicked grin, the red-vested man grabbed her collar and tore the front of her dress wide open. The crowd gasped, some in shock, some in sick delight. Laughter erupted. Clara folded her arms over her chest and fell to her knees, face burning with humiliation. Her body shook, not from pain, but from the death of dignity. She was no longer a girl in their eyes. Just a thing to punish, a warning, but across the square, beside the smoldering forge, someone moved. The hammering had stopped. Elias, the town blacksmith, wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped off the platform. Towering, broad-shouldered, hands blackened with ash and fire. He had watched in silence long enough. His face, usually unreadable, now twitched with fury. No one noticed him at first. They were too busy watching Clara break. But the moment Elias picked up the iron rod, still glowing red from the flames, and started walking, the air changed. His boots thudded against the dirt. Each step sent whispers rippling through the crowd. The laughter died. The mayor's son froze, holding the torn piece of Clara's dress like a trophy. Elias stopped in front of Clara. He looked down at her, not with pity, but with something far deeper. Then his eyes slowly lifted to the crowd. His voice didn't shout. It didn't need to, it rumbled. Low and sharp like thunder trapped in a canyon. "Who among you feels bigger for doing this?" Silence. Not one voice answered. The iron rod sizzled in his hand, still hot enough to sear flesh. He dropped it to the ground. It hissed as it hit the dirt, like a snake uncoiling. Then he stepped between Clara and the crowd, shielding her with his body. "You call this justice?" Elias growled. "This ain't justice. This is cowardice wrapped in spectacle." The red-vested man scoffed. "She stole. She got what she deserved." Elias turned slowly, and then for the first time everyone saw it. His eyes weren't just angry. They were broken, haunted, as if this moment was more than what it seemed. He took one step forward and stared the man down, inches apart now. The forge light flickered across Elias's face, revealing something no one had seen before tears. "You remind me of a man," Elias said, voice cracking. "He laughed like you did, at a girl just like her, my sister." The crowd tensed. She was 12. Elias whispered. "They dragged her through the streets, tore her dress, said she smiled too much at the preacher's son." Clara lifted her head. Her eyes met his. Elias clenched his jaw and stepped back. He knelt beside her, gently placing his hand on her shoulder. For a moment, the square stood frozen, time suspended between what had been and what was about to come. Then Elias leaned close and whispered 3 words in Clara's ear. Words soft as ash, but heavy enough to shift mountains. Words no one else heard, but they saw her reaction. Her eyes widened. Her lips trembled. And then, for the first time that day, Clara stood, not because someone pulled her up, but because she chose to rise. She turned toward the crowd, bloodied, bruised, humiliated, but standing. Behind her, Elias stood like a wall, unmovable, silent, and strong. Someone in the crowd stepped back, then another. The mayor's son lowered his eyes. Clara didn't need revenge. She had something more powerful, dignity, and the fire of a blacksmith's promise echoing in her soul. The square stood still as Clara rose to her feet, bloodied, shaking, but with something unshakable burning in her eyes. Elias, the blacksmith, stood behind her like a fortress. No one knew what he had whispered, but it was written across her face. She wasn't broken anymore. She was becoming something else. The mayor's son, still gripping the torn fabric in his trembling hand, opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The crowd that once jeered and laughed now stood quiet, unsure where to look. The performance had ended, but no one knew their lines anymore. Clara took 1 step forward. Her bare foot landed in the dust, right where she'd been dragged earlier. Then another. Her arms still hugged her chest, but her chin was up, defiant. The wind caught her hair, and for a brief second, she looked like something pulled straight from the fire. Scarred but shining, Elias walked beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. She didn't ask where they were going, and he didn't say. But their silence spoke louder than every word that had been thrown at her all day. They passed through the crowd, and no one dared stop them. Not the sheriff, not the mayor's son, not even the preacher who'd nodded in approval when the first slap landed. They walked past the general store, past the saloon where half the crowd had come from, and stopped at the edge of town, right by the blacksmith's forge. Elias opened the heavy wooden door. Clara stepped inside. The air smelled of soot and steel. She glanced around, unsure, her hands still trembling, but Elias didn't crowd her. He just pointed to a chair and spoke gently. "You sit. I'll fix you something warm." He turned without waiting and stoked the fire. Sparks flew, lighting the shadows with brief flashes of orange. Clara stared at him, her lips parted, still stunned by what had just happened. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. "What did you mean? Those 3 words?" Elias didn't turn. He poured water into a tin cup, dropped a dried herb in, and placed it near the flame. He let the silence stretch. Then slowly he looked at her. "I said, you still matter." Clara blinked. Those 3 words, soft, simple, hit harder than any iron he'd ever struck. No one had said anything like that to her. Not when her mother died. Not when her father drank himself into a grave. Not when her brother started coughing blood, and they had nothing left but each other. "You still matter." She stared at the fire, and then she cried. Not the weak, hopeless sobs of a girl in pain, but the heavy, shaking, soul-emptying tears of someone finally told they were more than just what they'd been through. Elias didn't interrupt. He just let her fall apart, safe this time, under a roof that didn't judge her. Outside, the town didn't move. Word spread like wildfire that Elias had stopped the show, that the girl had risen. That something had changed, but the change didn't come easy. Later that night, the mayor's son came with 3 men, drunk, angry, embarrassed. He pounded on the blacksmith's door like a wild animal. "You think you're some kind of hero," he slurred. "That girl's nothing. You're nothing." Elias opened the door, slow and calm. He didn't yell. He didn't reach for a weapon. He just looked the man in the eyes, and then, in a voice cold enough to freeze fire, said, She matters. You don't get to say otherwise." The man laughed, but it was hollow. "False, scared. Go home." Elias added, "Before you embarrass your father more than you already have." The three men stepped back. The mayor's son hesitated, but Elias didn't move. He didn't flinch. And something about that stillness, like iron cooled just enough to hold shape, sent them all walking away without another word. Inside, Clara stood at the window. She'd heard everything. But what struck her more than Elias's strength was how he never once called her girl, thief, or poor thing. He just called her Clara, and somehow that was more powerful than anything else. In the days that followed, the town changed. Quietly, a basket of bread showed up at the forge, then a new dress folded neatly on the porch, then a bag of flour. No one signed their names, no one came to speak. But shame moves like wind. It doesn't always need sound to be felt. One afternoon, Elias handed Clara a small hammer. She looked at it like it was a weapon. "It's not for hurting," he said. "It's for shaping, just like you." She blinked. "I don't know how to do anything. You'll learn." And she did. Each day, her arms grew stronger, her back straighter. She learned to mold metal, not with rage, but with patience. Fire taught her what people never did, that pain, when handled right, becomes strength. One morning, as she shaped a horseshoe, she asked Elias, "Why did you help me?" He wiped sweat from his brow and leaned against the wall. "Because someone should have helped my sister," he said softly, but no one did. "I swore if I ever saw that again, I'd stand in the way." Clara nodded, not out of pity, but out of understanding. She wasn't just living in the blacksmith's forge now. She was forging something new inside herself. A girl once torn apart before a crowd was now being rebuilt, piece by piece, beside a man who knew the weight of silence, the value of protection, and the power of 3 small words whispered in the dark. "You still matter," and those words, unlike anything else, had truly changed everything. Days turned into weeks, and Clara grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. The town's whispers slowly changed from cruel mockery to quiet curiosity. They saw her working alongside Elias, hammer in hand, shaping metal with steady determination. The girl who was once torn apart before the crowd was now becoming their strength. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in fiery red, Clara stood outside the forge watching the horizon. Her dress was no longer tattered but worn with pride, each stitch a silent testament to survival. Elias joined her, wiping soot from his hands. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She nodded. It was time to face the crowd again, but this time not as the broken girl they had scorned. The next day, the entire town gathered in the square once more. But something had shifted. The air was thick with anticipation, not cruelty. Clara stepped forward, no longer trembling. She held a horseshoe shaped by her own hands, a symbol of strength, protection, and new beginnings. Her voice, though quiet, carried clear across the crowd. "I was broken in your eyes," she said, "torn apart when I had no one to stand for me. But today, I stand here because I learned something you refuse to see. Pain doesn't define us. What we do after it, that is who we truly are." The mayor's son shifted uncomfortably, his face pale. The crowd watched, silent and wide-eyed. Clara lifted the horseshoe. "This is not just a piece of iron," she said. "It's a reminder that even the strongest steel is forged through fire. I was forged through your hatred, your cruelty, but I survived. I will continue to survive." A murmur rose through the crowd. Elias stepped beside her, strong and steady. "No one has the right to break another human soul," he said firmly. "Not here, not ever again." Slowly, hands began to clap, then more. Then the entire town erupted in applause, not for the girl they had tried to destroy, but for the woman she was becoming. Tears filled Clara's eyes, not from pain, but from hope. She had been torn apart in front of them all, but she had risen, because someone finally told her what she deserved to hear. "You still matter." That day, the blacksmith and the girl changed the town forever. They showed everyone the true power of kindness, strength, and standing up when the world tries to push you down. And Clara, once a broken girl, became a beacon of hope for all those who had ever been hurt and forgotten. Her story would live on, not as a tale of shame or sorrow, but as a testament to the unbreakable spirit inside us all. If this story moved you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss a powerful story like this one. Your support means everything, and together we keep these stories alive. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter what life throws at you, your story matters. Thank you so much for staying with me through this story. Your support truly inspires me every day.